Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and all you lovely chaotic neutrals, to this most recent episode of Dragons and Diatribes. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ed, here, joined by Ethan and Jared. Go ahead and say hi, guys.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going? Pleasure to be here.
And
Pleasure to be.
pleasure to be.
Just to be.
Just to exist.
Just having fun.
He's been reading his Descartes.
Yeah.
Thought that was the move.
I hear and I am, and I be.
Ergo sum. No cogito. Solo ergo.
Solo
Anyway,
ergo, correct.
Solo ergo sum. But today we're going to be discussing divine magic. This is going to be the first of kind of I think a three-part episode where we're going to be tackling in the subsequent episodes sort of the arcane elements of magic and the primal elements of magic, because one D&D has now separated out. As opposed to having class spell lists, you have the divine spells, you have the arcane spells, and you have the primal spells. So we're going to kind of discuss how we think about divine magic in this episode, subsequently arcane and primal magic, and ways you can integrate it into your game, different ways we have implemented it, and sort of certain thematic and campaign-dependent things, and just sort of generally spitball, talk about where it came from, and kind of discuss that. And I think Ethan had a couple of thoughts to get us started, or a couple of pointed questions, so I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, so divine magic, maybe just a little bit of a brief overview. Divine magic separated kind of from arcane and primal, and we can get into, actually my question is about kind of how you differentiate the three, but a general differentiation is usually divine magic is coming from an outward source other than the person or the character that is using it, usually because they have sworn fealty or have a relationship with some kind of other being. I say other being because primal magic, which we'll talk about in another episode, is nature based, and in nature I guess you could consider a being, but it's more of like the world, the natural world around you that you're drawing it from, instead of a physical being that you're having a relationship with. My question though was kind of directing it kind of at you guys is, what happens if, and I know Ed loves this, so that's why I'm kind of bringing up this question, especially with paladins, the oaths don't have to be to particular deities. The oaths, like the oath of devotion, could be an oath to a devotion to a nation, an oath of devotion to a particular king or person. Same with oath of vengeance. You don't have to swear vengeance and be like the god of vengeance, and that's who I'm just work for him. It could be it's usually to a particular person, but you're not asking for any help from a particular deity. So my question kind of was, in your games, do you kind of see your characters drawing their divine magic from? Is it actually from a deity, and if they don't have a connection to a deity, they don't get divine spells? Or is it more of, maybe it's an idea that they're connecting to, and they have such strong faith in that idea that particular idea gives them power? I was curious. I have my own thoughts on it, but I kind of wanted to hear what you guys had to say.
Yeah, I'll pass it to Jared first, because I've got some extended thoughts.
I kind of, I got a short version. So I like the concept of, I don't know who started doing this. I don't know where I found this idea, but there's an idea of like you said, the tenets and the devotional kind of aspect. I like to think of it as like a qualification system. Like if you adhere to the good or whatever, then like a certain god of that aspect unlocks his power to you, like an access pool almost. And then when you stop adhering to it, you lose it. If we're just talking like a general, like not like a general or I guess like a general, but not like a direct devotion, but like I want to be a good guy. I'm going to fight against the good stuff or fight for the good stuff. And by doing so, I've proven that I get the access. And that's a cool way for me. And that keeps a lot of people from actually having to be like, oh, was my god celebrated? Do I like my god? Blah blah, or like whatever god I want. I don't want to use that god. Okay, then just adhere to it. Almost like Christianity. Adhere to the tenets, you get into heaven. Win win.
So
Everybody gets it.
kind of what you're saying is like, you don't have to follow the god of justice, but if you are a paragon of justice, that god will just naturally give you
almost like whatever
you're doing a really good job for the cause of justice.
Almost like whatever inherent value you portray is the one you kind of get stuck with, I guess, because that's what you pull from. You can only pull from like that aspect.
You're pulling from the idea, and the idea, which is a personification of a particular god, that person gives you the power. That's actually interesting because,
and then when you break it, you lose all of it until you get back into the good.
That's actually super interesting because like you could flavor that really weird where you're from a country that has tyranny, and like that's their form of justice.
It definitely came from.
Justice doesn't have to be the most ideal form of justice. Any form of justice, and so if a god is a paragon or a personification of a particular thing, it could be, or like a god of like chains and incarceration. It could be positive chains and incarceration or negative. Depending on, and they'd give power to both because it's just pushing their one particular aspect. Is that correct?
Yeah, because I mean, like, I got a better example, I guess, would be like, think about like the conquest one. Like that's not a direct like paragon of virtue. Like you can flavor that to be chaotic or evil or just straight up like brutal. Like you could be like a murder hobo, or you can do a good conquest, like conquering evil or whatever. But I started looking at it that way when it started getting to the level of like some of the oaths were not quite like directly religious, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Like oath of conquest, oath of vengeance. You're kind of like embodying that bound, that thing. So things like that is probably when I don't know where I read it, but I think I was just browsing through Reddit one day or something, and someone was talking about how like they did like access to, I think it's because they were trying to like explain the access to the channel divinities as like a vengeance person. Like how do you call out for vengeance and then like personify that? So that's pretty much the only thing that actually like I feel like works, because a lot of people don't really want to get like super into the direct god affiliation thing. And I really like as like the game runner, I don't want to like be the guy who's like, oh, your god doesn't answer you, and you just like kind of
like your spell doesn't work because
the god's just upset at you for not being, because you lied one time and you were supposed to be honest or something like that. So like
I've done that.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not saying it's not part of the game. Like it's entirely doable.
It wasn't quite in Theros actually. It's and are you done, Jared?
Yeah, no, we can build off whatever, dude. Go ahead.
Here's a diatribe for you. I'll take you guys.
Oh God, never mind then. Never mind. Stop. Cut.
I'll
30-minute rant.
Everything's going to come together, I promise. There's going to be a couple elements I want to integrate in here to sort of explain how I conceptualize divine magic.
Ethan and I are taking a short break.
So I recently listened to a podcast. It's called the podcast is called Dispel Magic. It's a great podcast by these two guys. Essentially, what they do is what they'll do is they'll take a particular spell in D&D and like overthink its implications, right? They'll take water breathing or clone or dispel magic or fly or whatever you have, and we'll basically just think about like, if you want to have this spell be an emphasis in your world, right? How is it going to change what the world looks like? Right? How does the existence of this spell necessitate the world adapting? For example, there's one spell that they have called like Nistel's Magic Aura. Right? It's a second level spell in D&D, and basically one of the effects of it is you can either mask something that is magical to appear as non-magical to detection magic, or vice versa. You can make something that's not magical appear as magical to detection magic, and this is a second level spell. And one of the things they just said about this is like, this would necessitate almost every single purveyor of magical goods having the ability to cast Dispel Magic, because you would
Be sold crap.
you'd be sold duds, because you have somebody who's a third level wizard, which is not that high, who's able to basically be a con man. And they also said, you know, another interesting effect is like, maybe you have rich people who pay for their non-magical things to appear as magical, almost like a faux gemstone or something, right? So it's like a status. So it's just, they overthink this kind of stuff, and it's really cool, the implications. But they did an episode.
A third level wizard going around to rich people and just like magicalizing their stuff, fake magicalizing their stuff.
Yeah, precisely. You know, that kind of thing. And one of the episodes they did was on the cleric. And this is something one of them pointed out, which I had not thought of before, and then kind of realized upon hearing it, it's kind of how I've been running magic the whole time, divine magic at least. What it is that all clerics have access to all spells on the cleric spell list, right? So it doesn't actually matter. Like, your domain lets you have certain spells available all the time, but you could be a, you know, forge domain cleric and take exclusively necromancy spells, or you could be a, you know, death domain cleric and take exclusively illusion spells, right? There's not actually the particular tenets of your god doesn't actually give you particular, like, it gives you certain magic you can access all the time, but it seems that the gods, what they're doing is they're actually allowing the clerics to access something deeper, that there is some source beyond the gods to which the clerics are given access. Because that explains how, you know, you could have somebody taking all these necromancy spells as a life domain or as a light domain, right? They're granted almost like a gate into this deeper source of magic. Now I'm going to take it back to classical mythology here for a second. In the Iliad, that's actually kind of how divine power is thought of a little bit, because there's this sense that there is something beyond the gods, and the Greeks, it's generally thought of as like fate, right? There's some source of power that exists that even the gods are subservient to. And I think that makes sense in D&D as well, that there is just mechanically some source of power into which things can be allowed access. But the gods don't even have full control of it, because if the gods had full control of it, they could just deem certain spells as being what their clerics can cast. Instead, they basically give their clerics access to certain magic, trusting that they're going to be following the tenets of the faith. And
it reminds me, you're speaking like of like the Force. I'm thinking of like Star Wars now.
A little bit.
Like,
and
anybody
kind of
can get into it, but like you can use it for a whole bunch of different things.
Precisely. And what's interesting is I think this explains paladins, because the way I tend to conceive paladins, right, is that the power comes from the oath, right? And the oath, you know, to people nowadays is not something super powerful. Like, people, you know, oh, I swear this, I swear that, right? It's all over the place. But if we're taking this to the setting of D&D, right, it's actually more akin to sort of the medieval conception of the oath, or the Anglo-Saxon, right, where the oath like actually has a force of power behind it. Your words actually have power behind it. So the way I conceive of paladin oaths, for example, an oath of vengeance, right? Speaking, you know, having this vow, it could be to a god. All right, that's not precluded, but the power of words itself and these certain things like conquest, devotion, glory, these sort of almost platonic forms, the oath bypasses the need for the god to allow access to this deeper magic. And instead, it's simply the force of, it's not will because it's they're charisma casters, right?
Right.
But it's the power of their personality and their desire to fulfill this thing is what gives them access to this magic. And that's how, and it doesn't necessarily need to be to an ideal, right? I think one of the most interesting concepts is a paladin whose vow is like their wedding vows. I've heard of that one. That's a really cool take where it's like their oath of devotion is based off of like I've seen this is like online and stuff, but like two players play a married couple and one of them's like an oath of devotion paladin to the other person, and that is sort of their the notions of protecting and keeping. It's about this particular person, and their desire to do this is so strong it gives them access to this deeper well of magic. And you see sort of elements of this. I think Wheel of Time has something similar, right, where there's this sort of dual aspect of magic that is sort of this deep-rooted source upon which people are able to draw, and it's spun a little more arcane, I think, in Wheel of Time, but you can very easily sort of equate it to divine magic because there is this sort of source upon which the people can draw, and it's deeper than the gods. So that's kind of how I tend to think about it because, like, I guess it's a little. Go ahead.
Well, and a cool thing about Wheel of Time too is it's almost like if it is a well, it can be corrupted, which is what Wheel of Time does a beautiful job of. Is this idea that like you can corrupt the source because it's not tied to a deity; it's actually just a pool, which could be a unique like campaign setting.
Well, that's kind of what's actually. I'm going to go ahead and say spoiler alert for my campaign. If you're one of my players,
get out of here.
Get out of here. Come back and move 10 minutes forward or so. Maybe
hopefully
a little.
We'll be done by then.
Hopefully we'll be done by then. But one of the things I've integrated into this campaign is I open every session with like an introduction that is telling a story from the world that basically the players end up finding out in game. But basically what it allows me to do is have these kind of tight, 3-5 minute little bits at the beginning that accumulate. And so eventually they have, over 10 or 15 sessions, like an hour of world building that's broken down into manageable chunks and then actually is pertinent to what they are going through. And that's part of what the suspense of that is they all know, especially at this point, it's going to relate to what's going on in the campaign, but how does this relate? So what I'm doing right now is I'm going through the very beginning of, like, very early on in the world. There's this event that's sort of been described, because in my world there's 21, at least in this continent, there's 21 primary deities. And there's good, neutral, and evil deities. And the one of the things that's been talked about is this thing called each god has an avatar into whom they put power. I addressed this a little bit in the gods episode. And the first time that happened is coming up on 3,000 years before the events of the campaign. And there's been allusion in legend, and they've heard this, at various times throughout the campaign, that the original 21 all stood together and basically defeated these beings called the Titans, which are actually less like giants and more like great old ones, is what the players are going to be finding out shortly. They're like more like Cthulhu-esque, evil creatures.
World threat level. Planetary threat level.
Under the symbol.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's precisely what it is. But what they're basically having and realizing in this setup is that at the time, all of the gods were aligned. They were actually, like, all of the 21 were just called the Shining Ones. there's not the good, the evil, the neutral. They are all these paragons, and indeed all of their avatars are these paragons of virtue. So it's like one of the things that I think the players are waiting on is like, how did this happen? How do we have such horribly evil deities now from what happened? And what's going to eventually happen is that the sort of primary evil titan I named him Ixbathaden after a giant from medieval literature, and Ixbathaden is called the Curse Caller. And basically, what's going to happen is when he's struck down, he's going to place a curse on the gods. And it's actually, the way I'm going to set it up is the avatars that are physically closest to him when he falls, he uses them as an entry point to actually corrupting the deities. So it's going to be kind of a big reveal, like, oh, the only reason that these ones are evil is that they happen to have their avatars be physically close to this guy and allow for this corruption to take place.
It's a proximity thing, not a prioritized thing. It's just happenstance that it turned out that way.
Yes. So
because you brought this up, you kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, because that's kind of the way I play it too. Is the way that, in the sense that, in the way that Dispel Magic guys thought of it, like it's a pool. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did that, I actually got to it from a different logical reasoning standpoint. Mm-hmm. But instead of saying, hey, they have access to all the same spells all the time and they can choose them, which is a really smart way to think about it. The way I thought about it was, if it just comes from the deity, then why are they not warlocks? Because warlocks draw power specifically from a specific thing, whether it's because they have a relationship or because the thing doesn't know that they're siphoning it. And so it's like, are clerics just holy warlocks? But if that's the case, like, can a warlock, I think it'd be super cool to play a warlock that is siphoning magic off of a god or a deity and they don't know about it. Like, that'd be a cool character to play. So it's like,
but they still keep those spells, right?
Yeah,
but they're just siphoning it from like a good person. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
that'd be pretty cool.
Celestial warlock, right? Celestial warlock.
Yeah, and there's like celestial warlocks, and so I'm like, how does that? And so that's how I kind of came to the idea of like, it's a well, and also the way I have it set up in my world, which I talked about last time, is like they're stewards, so there is something more they're drawing on. They were given a vast amount of access to be able to manipulate like the creation around them based on things that were asked of them or that they upheld. And so it makes sense that they've just been given higher access to it, and they can give their clerics a small modicum of access to it if they are furthering the things that they're stewarding. So yeah, that definitely, I like that way of thinking about it as a pool.
And that's not to say like you can't go the other way, because I think that I liked your view of it, Jared, because it gives the gods a different role, I guess, in terms of how you think about paladins, because it's in a weird way, it almost increases the power of the deities in your setting, right? Because even if you don't know you're serving one, you are, but it's a very distant, withdrawn relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like a passive blessing thing, like, because like the way I think about it is like think about any like profession or anything, like think about like Usain Bolt. People would say that he's blessed with his athletic ability. Mm-hmm. So like that's how I think about it. Like if you're gonna be like the high of the high, and you're gonna embody this whole thing, like you get like even if you don't want it, you like are blessed in compared to even if it's not direct, people see you as like you're blessed. At least like the common person would see the level 9 paladin being like, oh yeah, that guy's got favoritism. He's favored. He's loved by the gods or whatever it is.
That's what that like also really ties in well with the type of worlds you run. Because you don't run like in your face, here's the Pantheon campaigns. You run campaigns where it's like, yeah, there's some gods and they have churches, most of which are corrupt, but that still doesn't mean that there aren't good people in those churches. and that those people could be being given power even without having a direct relationship with their gods, because the gods just don't have that much direct influence on the world. But they can still like be like, oh, you know, you're following my tenets, so here's some power.
And it almost creates a way to recast paladins as that divine warlock, because it almost casts them as like siphoning this power when they are not having as direct a relationship with the cleric. And perhaps that could be the way that oath breaking would lead to you having your powers removed, is that the god doesn't notice while you're aligned with it because of the way the god functions, but then when you use the power to do something that is against it,
he's like, wait a minute. A little alarm goes off.
Or it's just an automatic thing. Like the god doesn't even know that it's happening. It's just like just stops, because that's interesting.
Which is a cool, I don't know, you can definitely play with that, especially if you have a paladin, like kind of
and I feel like and then the reason I really also like it is because like it's really easy to like start from behind and work your way forward. So like if you need more like direct connection, you could push that, and that's way easier than trying to like revoke direct connection. Because like if you start out like that, they're just like, oh, I used to be able to talk to him. It's like, oh, now you can't. And then you kind of like need to come up with like a bunch of different reasons why you can't access it, why no one can access it, why only you can't access it. So I feel like it's hard to kind of retrograde that, but it's really easy to like, if one person needs a more like direct influence, boom, you can just kick out a little bit more, and then you're on your way still.
And something I love too about divine magic, this is another kind of digression a little bit, but it's this was brought up in Exandria Unlimited Calamity, which is Brennan Lee Mulligan directed DMing with a combination of Critical Role and D20. And I think one of the coolest moments he had is that basically there's this like evil spoiler alert, yeah, there's an evil cleric, not among the party, but who attacks a member of the party, and like he looks corrupted. Like he's got, I don't recall exactly how he's described it. Like his flesh is like kind of rotted and like what have you. And one of the characters asked to make a religion check on this character, and Brennan came up with an answer in response to a high religion check that actually explained why clerics don't start at level 20. And the description he gave is that it's not that the gods can't give power to mortals that is extreme. Like, it's not to say the gods can't make you a 20th level cleric. But the way he spun it is in this world, right? If you are given divine magic and you are immediately given that amount, it like tears you apart. Yeah. And so the gods that actually care about their followers and their clerics have to sort of slowly acclimatize them to the power that they're channeling. And what is the case with this particular NPC villain is he's been overcharged, which basically tells them they're dealing with a deity that has no concern for the human lives and his followers, because it's literally destroying this cultist.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
It's a really cool.
Did you guys ever see the that animated cyberpunk show on Netflix?
Oh yeah.
So you did see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So you remember how they were talking about how like the side, like, because there was like that bigger like black guy that was like the mentor to the kid, And he was like,
Yeah.
he was like, slow down because your body, you need to like strengthen your
Yeah.
body to endure more cybertronics. That's what
And
I
then
kind of think
even
of.
then-
And then they go crazy, like with
even then it goes,
spoilers,
yeah, it's
spoiler
Cyber
alert, I guess,
Psycho.
whatever. Yeah, then you go cyber psycho. So like that, I like that. I like that. That's cool too, though, because like you
it's
could
also
have all of it at
reminiscent of-
once, but you'd be like
of-
immediately
It's
lost.
reminiscent of My Hero Academia as well, with the.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've read about that. Wait,
it's-
who
because,
can
I
can
guess,
he do it?
So, I guess spoiler alert, but the whole thing is Midoriya, right? He can channel 100% of the power, but right early on, it just destroys his body when
Yeah.
he does it.
He's like
So
some
he has
snapping
to,
his
like-
fingers, trying to get these attacks
exactly.
off.
And it's slowly, but he's basically got to slowly get himself used to having certain levels of power, so he's able to operate at these high levels without,
Destroying himself, yeah.
destroying himself. So it's a similar concept to like divine magic, though I will say Brennan's concept leaves you with the question of paladins. And if they don't have a deity, how do they keep from overstepping? And I just thought of this now, like if paladins are drawing from an oath, and this is the concept, right, is that the gods don't give the power because it can overcharge and kill you. And that obviously doesn't have to be the case in your world, but if you're running with this, because I think it makes sense, right, how do you have paladins that are removed from a direct relationship with a god that keep from being overcharged?
Oh, I got one. I think
Go ahead.
this might work. Maybe it might need workshopping. But like my concept would be like, well, maybe you get a reward for staying with the like staying attuned to like or how well attuned you stay to it. So like if you like are flawless from 1 to 20, then like every time you level, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's how you're able to access like take in more and more and more. But you might have to like change that a little bit, because then if you start faltering, you start losing a little bit. So if you get to like level 9, then you start deviating.
Sure.
And then you get to like level 15, like you're no longer at 15, you're still at like 9, or you're like 4 now. It's like subtracted. But like that'd be a
Or
cool thing. I'd probably try to do.
Think about this. I don't know, Ed, if you're going the same way. You're a paladin. You're going up in level. You falter on one level, and you as the DM go, you get a level in fighter. You don't get a level in paladin this time.
Oh,
Interesting.
forced multi-class.
And you can then forced multi-class, and then it's like you didn't do well enough. You killed this guy in cold blood because you got angry or whatever, or just because you thought it was jokey, funny, and this was like just a game. Well, now you get to take a level in fighter. You don't get a level in paladin this time.
I like
You
that
know,
too.
that could be interesting if you work that out with the players, right? If they
Yeah,
go,
well, yeah,
going
of
in.
course, but like,
What I was thinking as an explanation,
or just saying up front, this is how I run paladins. You have to be okay with that,
Yeah.
or
and
choose a
what I-
different character.
What I think is an explanation here, maybe for paladins, is that the way they access divine magic is different. And what I mean is this: so clerics, you can conceive perhaps of this source of magic reaching out and pushing through them, right? And that's why they need to acclimatize themselves, and they can't. But paladins, perhaps you could conceive of their power being less that it's reaching out to them and more that they are reaching into it. So paladins are almost like athletes in that as they level up, they have
Or take more.
they're able to take more because their muscles, quote, in air quotes, their magical muscles or their divine magic muscles are stronger. So it's like a different way of conceiving of the same thing, but it's not that something's being channeled through them. It's that they're pulling it down, and now they're able to pull down more of it as opposed to have more of it pushed through them.
Like one's stopping the floodgates and one's trying to break the dam.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that it's basically, are you doing it to yourself,
Right.
or are you having it done to you?
I like that a lot too, though. I like that too. I had that same kind of thing came to me as well. So that's why I was talking about. I was like when you're honing, like the attunement to your bond, the bond gets stronger, therefore you just get more and more used to whatever. But yeah, that's good. I like that too. Like, at least conceptually, like it makes sense. It's sound. How you would really do it.
But
Yeah.
like a conduit can overjuice. They can like you can blow a fuse as a conduit.
Yeah.
But you can't blow a fuse if you're the one reaching out and pulling in the energy because you have a self limiter that is yourself.
Yeah. Precisely. And it's like, yeah, because their magic comes from not necessarily directly from a god. It's that I'm trying to think of like an athletic example of this. Like I'm
thinking of it like an electric current.
Oh, when the monks are holding the cup of hot water. You're able to hold it longer and longer and longer.
Yeah,
that's what I would think of.
Paladin,
yeah. Sorry, we talk about. What is what we're talking about?
Both.
Oh,
both.
Yeah.
Either one. Like, just
I would do it as like a.
I
do it as like a strainful thing, or like how long you can hold yourself on like a bar or something like that for the paladin.
Yeah.
I would,
maybe that's
and then like, or like
a cleric
like
is
that.
how hard you can punch, because like you can punch harder than your body can take, but you can't hold a bar longer than your body can take. I mean, in the same way, right? You can punch hard enough to like break your arm.
Break your own hand. Yeah.
You can't break your own hand holding a bar. I mean,
Right.
it just, I guess conceptually, I mean, maybe there's something, some way you can overstrain your body, but just like, if you're holding onto a bar, you're just going to slip off when you can't do anymore. If you punch harder than you're able to punch, you're still going to deal the damage, but you're going to hurt yourself.
I like that though. That's good. At least conceptually, if like people want to run that, at least for like an explanation of like, oh well, if X is so strong and powerful in their divinity, why can't I just be powerful instantly? That's good though. I like that. You found that on like a regular video?
It would be cool.
It was Brendan Lee Mulligan explaining in one of his. It was in game, like it was in an actual play.
Oh, okay, I got you.
And a player rolled a religion check, and
that's
was his explanation for the cleric side of it. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
It would be even cool taking this. I'm the king of weird, wacky rules for characters. What would be super cool is if you talk to your player and homebrew a rule where it's like you can like once a day do one spell level higher than what you're capable of, but it comes at a cost. Like the first time it's exhaustion, or like you start wearing out, or there's some kind of thing that happens to you, and you can figure out you'd homebrew whatever it is. It could be different for different characters, right?
I mean, I think an easy one is just your maximum HP is reduced by 3 times the level of the spell, or something like that, or 4 times. Like if you cast a second level spell, it's you lose. I mean, you could maybe even do 5 times, right? If you cast a second level spell, you lose 10 hit points until you take a long rest. If you cast a 9th level spell, you lose. My math is about 45 hit points. That might even be too low, though, is the issue of upcasting to 9th level, right? But that it's maybe you could find a way to
maybe
you could do die, it, right? You could do die as well.
Like you can only cast a spell up to 3 levels above, or whatever.
Yeah,
because anything above that would just outrightly kill you. Like it would just or whatever.
I did something kind of similar. It wasn't upcasting, but I created a. I'm pulling up the doc now. I created a druid circle called Circle of the Unknown. And one of their abilities I gave was this. Let's see. Yeah, I call this Voidal Burst. Let's see. So starting at 6th level, your connection to alien, basically the idea here is it's like a great old one druid. Like basically a druid who's sort of attached to the far realms and kind of draws on the sort of dark Lovecraftian nature. But starting at 6th level, your connection to alien magic has allowed you to fracture reality in certain ways. By expending a spell slot, you may cast a spell from any class's list of a level equal or lesser than the spell slot you expended. To do so, you must succeed on a wisdom saving throw with a DC equal to 8 plus twice the spell's level. If you succeed, the spell is cast as normal. If you fail, the spell is cast randomly in a way determined by the DM. Additionally, when you fail, you gain madness determined by the level of the spell. It's level 1 through 3, you gain short-term madness. 4 through 6, long-term madness. 7 through 9, indefinite madness. And you get to use that once per like short or long rest. So, right, like it allows the druid to take a risk and basically put itself into the void to try and pull the magic it needs in the moment. If it just like, I need this revivify to go off, I'm going to try to reach onto the, and it may work or it may not. And it's kind of that's similar, but it's not upcasting. But that's kind of how I balanced it with the madness mechanics. But you could easily do other ways of those, because madness isn't really thematic for a cleric upcasting. Or a paladin, but I think there's a cool way you could integrate that.
You could also lose just a number of spell slots equal to that spell. Like if you're casting a 4th level, you lose 4 spell slots, and it can be like 1st and 2nd level. It can be like 1 3rd level and 1 2nd, or 1 3rd level and 1 1st level.
Yeah, it all depends. I mean, like it depends. You really want to like punish them.
I definitely have to workshop it. But
yeah,
that'd be
I mean, it would be. I mean, it's the. Yeah, only problem with it, I guess, quote unquote, and like it's only for high level play. But like if they tap out their spell slots, it kind of becomes a dead ability, right? Because they can't upcast anything. I guess you could maybe use it to double cast level 9 spells or something. But
I wasn't even thinking about it as like an ability. I was just like I guess
he was thinking of consequences more than anything else.
It doesn't become. That'd be a cool thing though, where you could then like double cast. You could like twin cast, almost like a sorcerer, a 9th level spell.
Yeah. I mean, 2 9th level spell slots is
pretty insane.
I guess for a cleric, I mean, it's good, right? But it's not as busted as it might be for a wizard.
Yeah.
But in the same turn, like the same action sets? Or just in general,
no,
like you can just cast
let's say you use up your 9th level spell slot, then you can go beyond, push beyond, and like go plus ultra and use 1 more 9th level spell.
Yeah,
but it's like taxes you to the limit.
Right, I understand that, but I'm saying, can you do it? Because you said twinning, so can you do it in the same?
No,
or would you do it in the same?
That was bad terminology.
Yeah, because I was like, hold on, now if we're just shooting, 2 9s out.
Oof. I'm pulling up the cleric spell list.
Good night.
Seeing what they're.
Good night, bad guy.
Yeah. Just gonna
just
bam, bam.
Swarm times 2.
Just quick draw 2 9s. Pop out. Dead.
Well, they don't have meteor swarm, right?
No, I know.
No, they don't.
But I think the 2 here. I mean, the ones that are really good, I think True Resurrection could possibly be worth it.
You lose 2 players in a fight, and you just like True Resurrect both of them.
Yeah, I think the other one though that actually might be even better is Power Word Heal.
Oh yeah,
which I don't know if you're familiar with the spell, Jared, but you target a creature, and the target regains all of its hit points.
Wow.
If it is charmed, frightened, paralyzed, or stunned, the condition ends. If it's prone, it can use its reaction to stand up. So it basically just resets, like it, not like abilities or spell slots. The other one, I guess, would be Mass Heal, which
that's dope.
Yeah, that'd be insane.
Did you watch the one shot of like all the like? Did you watch the one shot of the Mighty Nine fighting what's the giant Leviathan's name? Ukatoa.
I've not actually.
Jester, who doesn't spoiler alert, doesn't heal ever. She was a cleric that like never healed anybody, which is why Caduceus did all the healing.
Classic.
They're like in this fight, and she like Caduceus isn't there because Talison's playing another character, Kingsley, and he she like does her duplicates and like does this crazy thing where she uses mass heal and like brings everybody back, and it's like a ridiculous amount of hit points, and she's like, I just like I think it was like the most hit points healed in like Critical Role history, and she's just like, I just made up for the entire campaign of not healing you guys.
700 divided as one among.
Oh my god.
And it's like people within a certain area, but I think they homebrewed it to where her duplicate counted as like an extra person, so that anybody within the duplicate's radius or her radius could get healed.
That's just the trickery domain's ability. You can cast spells as if you are in your duplicate space. Yeah. So that I don't know if that's
I'm not homebrewed, but
Jester's she was out here doing the shadow clone,
basically, where it was like anybody within her radius or the duplicate's radius got healed.
So it follows, it follows the Naruto shadow clone abilities. Nice. Where like the shadow clones can just run around and do all crazy stuff. But that's cool. I like that actually a lot. I was thinking more of like a quick little like 9/9 pop pop. That's what I thought you meant originally.
No,
which is terrifying. That's what I was like. I was like, that is just terrifying. Just
double power word kill.
I know. Could you imagine how baller that would be though? You're just standing there and like the guys are getting low. Like, how do they look a little rough? Like, I look okay. And you're like, all right, cool. Bam, bam. Just power word kill both of them.
Or even you have like, you got a second power word kill. So you do it on the big bad the first time, it doesn't work. You're like, okay, he doesn't have low enough hit points. Mm-hmm. Wait for like a couple rounds.
And then you just
hit him again.
Yep. The scary thing about power word kill is it avoids all sorts of like, it's not save based. It's not action layer based. There's nothing to save you. You hit 100 if you are at 100 or 99, and he says power word kill. Boom, fight's done. Guy drops. Terrifying. Just terrifying.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Could you imagine having two of those in your back pocket, just like ready to go?
That's why I tend to think of power word kill as being a DM spell, actually, more than a PC spell. Because like it I never give bad guys wish just on principle.
I don't even allow wish, so you're better than me.
I think I'd be in that. I would probably be in that same boat if we went high enough, just because it defeats the point.
I like Matt Mercer's way of doing it, where if you get the wish spell, you get it one time. Like, you don't just get to cast the wish spell anytime you want. You have to cast it specifically, and then like it's done. Which is why like in the first campaign, and like there's limits to it. Like, I don't think DMs do enough of a job of being like, there's a limit to wish. You can't just wish for anything and you'll get it.
Yeah, I agree.
Like for example. In campaign 1, Scanlan used his 9th level spell. Spoiler alert, campaign 1 of Critical Role. So if you haven't seen it yet,
spoiler alert for a 5-year, 6-year-old. It's probably more than 6 years, isn't it now?
He uses his 9th level spell to counterspell a teleport, and they defeat the what's his name? Why can't I think of his name? Vecna. Because of it, but. In doing so, he was saving his 9th level spell for a wish spell to wish that Axeldan wouldn't have to go to the Raven Queen. And the idea was technically that transaction hadn't happened yet. So he could wish for it to not have been, like the document to not have been signed or whatever. But after he actually goes into the service of the Raven Queen, that transaction is completed and it cannot be changed by a wish spell. Because that otherwise he could have just done it the next day, like when he had another 9th level spot. But because that had already happened and it wasn't the time to make the wish, it was after the fact, that had already happened and that couldn't be changed.
Yeah. And also, like, I think there is a specific. I haven't read the spell in a while, but like, I'm pretty sure it words it like be very specific, as in like you could be like almost genied out of it. You're like, oh, I wish to be rich, and then like they give you like, like a book, and now you're like, now you're rich in knowledge, haha, gotcha.
Yeah.
The example they give in the book is wishing that, a particular enemy is dead, and the wish spell takes you to a point far in the future where they have died of old age. Yeah, that kind of thing.
So I almost treat wish, because I allow wish in my games, in case nobody knew, based on my reaction. But mine is like, if you make a wish, I'm going to spend some time figuring out exactly what that means for my game based on the wording you give me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that might be a way to balance it, is they get to use it once ever.
Yeah.
I think that does give it a balancing factor, because it gives basically the wizard the opportunity to one time just
use his arcane ability to alter reality.
And then you could actually make it like a true altering thing, because like every long rest you get a $25,000 or 25,000 gold piece artifact. Like, come on now, like,
yeah,
every long rest.
Yeah, just because you could theoretically just generate infinite wealth and then crash the economy because you've inflated everything so much.
Well, that just breaks the game, because if anybody is a level 20 wizard, like, let's say you're playing a high magic society, everybody's just using a wish all the time. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find any high level people who aren't using it like that.
Yeah.
Which again makes, well, I mean, like, I guess you could really do it if you really want to, but it'd be like talk about like an elite class or like a real, like,
the way I
income disparity economy floating around of all these guys just being like, oh.
Yeah. The way I played into my game is that for the one time, because it's a one-time deal for the wish, is no wish spell is cast the same way. So like, you can unlock the formula for a wish spell, but that's like the only one. Then you have to like spend a long time and a lot of like effort to get another wish spell, because you have to completely redo the spell, the equation from the ground up, the arcane equation from the ground up, because it's not at all like, it's all unique. So once you use it once and if you try to use it again, it just doesn't work.
Sure.
It's kind of how I make it to where it's not like, oh, it just doesn't work. It's like, no, there's a specific reason. Reality doesn't want to be adjusted. So it's almost like when you hack into something, they're going to change their password, so you can't hack into it again.
Yeah. That's a cool way to think about it.
It's a good analogy.
It's an adjusting environment to keep from being screwed with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't want to say like that's finding you, just be like, the gods don't change early, or like, their will fights everyone else's, stuff like there's a whole bunch of things you could think of.
Yeah. But that's arcane. We kind of got off topic.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
But that's why it's called Dragons and Diatribes.
Speaking of ninth level spell slots, I discovered one that I hadn't previously discovered, and I'm giving it to an NPC, as I've often given power word kill or power word kill equivalents to NPCs, and it works. It does create a highly dramatic moment always, but the one that I'm giving this NPC that they'll be fighting shortly is Psychic Scream, which I think is from Xanathar's. It's not a PHB 9th level spell, but it was super cool to me because it forces, I believe, an intelligence save, which nobody has. But not Psychic Shiny Sandwich. What the hell? Okay. All right, my thing is right. But let's see here. So yeah, up to 10 creatures of your choice within range must make an intelligence saving throw. If you have an intelligence of 2 or lower, you're unaffected. On a failed save, a target takes 14d6 psychic damage and is stunned. On a successful save, the target takes half as much damage and isn't stunned.
Mm.
If a target is killed by this damage, its head explodes.
Nice. Very good.
Nice. What is
And
that? Psychic Scream?
Psychic Scream.
Did you create that, or is it from
It's from Xanathar's.
Xanathar's? I gotta remember that one.
It's but yeah, basically the players started investigating a murder scene, and it was like just a ton of exploded heads, and they were like, "What the hell?" And then they figured out. None of them are familiar with the spell, I don't think. So I was worried about one of them maybe knowing it,
Yeah.
but he fortunately tends to not play sort of psychically oriented characters. So he didn't know what it was. So I'm like,
Nice.
funny. Now they're going to be actually wondering how this character did that, not knowing that this spell exists. Yeah. So they're
amazing.
Going to be interacting with a particular assassin soon, who uses that spell.
That's super cool.
Like that one.
I'm trying to think. For divine magic, kind of talked about the pool instead of the individual, drawing from the individual person or a relationship with them, or also just drawing from the idea that that particular deity personifies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think. Do you play where? This was the question I was going to ask. I had to think about it for a minute. Where do you, in your guys's, and this kind of overlaps maybe a little bit, but it ties into part of how I think about it. So I'm curious about your thoughts. Where do you have bards draw their magic from?
Oh,
Jared, you go first, because
I need to think for a second because I don't think I've ever thought of that.
Okay, then I'll talk about mine then. The reason I bring this up is because I
always forget they're magical.
The way I view bards is that they tap into all three different types of magic. They tap into divine magic, they tap into arcane magic, and they tap into primal magic. Based on what the situation needs, they're able to pull upon it through their unique connection to like music and the music of like reality itself. So based on the situation, they're able to draw from the different particular.
I was going to answer yes. Just which do they draw on? Yes.
Yes.
I'm in the same boat. I tend to think that although they have limited spells that they can cast normally, it does seem to draw on all of them, the spell lists. Mm-hmm. Additionally, they do have the I forget the name of it's not Mystic Arcanum, that's Warlocks, but they have the higher level ability where basically they gain a spell from like 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level from other spells classes lists that they can just pull on. So I tend to think that that's how Scanlan could cast Wish. So I tend to think that they are able to sort of tap into, I guess, the harmony of all parts of magic.
All three. Yeah.
All sources.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about it, that's probably the best one. But for like if someone, this popped into my head as well, if someone does want to flavor like their inspiration and you can make that direct, I wouldn't even call it divine. I would call it like like when you hear like a good song, or like your favorite song, like you can't help but like move your shoulders, like bounce your like jump your leg a little bit, like bounce your toes or whatever. Like that's what I would think of for something like that. Like that almost like inherent like feel good that like music provides for people, because like even psychologically, like they say music like helps brain development and Mozart makes kids smarter and whatever and all that, but like that feeling like when you hear like a good groove or a good beat, you like have to like bounce your head or whatever it is. That's what I like that for the inspiration side, but everything else I agree with. Like harmonically, it has to be harmonically.
It seems kind of comparable to, I mean, just I guess they are like, it's kind of like, I think it's akin to the paladin, the way we discussed it before, but it's not. I guess the other issue with paladins, quote unquote issue, right? As they stand in 5e, they have a bunch of spells that are not available to any other classes, clerics included.
Correct.
So there is, I guess, something slightly different about what paladins are doing, kind of. But a lot of clerics get access to some paladin spells and vice versa, so they clearly overlap. But
But I
bards,
also
I tend
think you can pull from the same pool and pull different things,
Mhm.
and it just like for the smites and stuff. My argument is a cleric can reach into the pool, but they're just not using that kind of spell, or that they're not using it for that kind of spell. I guess.
Sure. Yeah, but I think bards, it actually kind of reflects music itself, right? Because the idea when you're a musician, right, is what you're capable in terms of complexity ramps up the more you do it, right? So, like, and obviously certain people have a cap on how complex they can get, which perhaps is the reason why some bards never hit level 20, is because, like, there is like a physical limitation even sometimes on like a musician in the real world, right? You have pianists, who have pieces they cannot play no matter how much they practice, because
your hands aren't big enough to play or something like that.
Yeah, or it's like, however much I practice sprinting, I'll never be Usain Bolt, kind of to your point, is because like bards seem to actually have it actually reminds me a bit of something you said several episodes ago, Jared. This sort of I guess it's almost the opposite of like, do you remember like the access, like they access over ability, I think is how you described it, like the concept that like somebody's always had the power, but they're only just now drawing on it. Like it's always been inside them, but they're finally realizing it. It's almost the opposite with the bards. Like they have a talent ceiling, and they have to basically get it's like music. You have to get the figures down, and you slowly approach your ceiling. And that's kind of how bards work, is they can increase the complexity and the nuance of their understanding of this stuff, as opposed to wizards, who like wizards actually, this might be dipping a little into arcane, but I think it might be okay here. It's just like wizards kind of seem to be basically building more and more complex formulas, which parallels greater complexity in music. But one seems to be something that you can purely based on intelligence. The other one has an aspect of like creativity and like physical expertise, and it's almost, yeah. I mean, it's like
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like you have a world-class pianist versus an astrophysicist, right? They both are actually kind of using the same stuff. Just one is doing it more improvisationally and based off of like innate understanding, and one is doing it off of, insane amounts of study.
Right.
So I'm gonna actually make it. So the reason my bards work this way, which is the way you were kind of talking about it, Ed, too, is actually specifically due to a conversation that we had at your house with your family. So the reason that they can touch on every single aspect of magic is because the only other thing, at least in my world, that can do that is actually like God or creation or Iluvatar, insert highest being here that's even above the stewards. Yeah. The reason artists can do that, the reason that bards can do that is because they're artists and they're imitating the creator, which means they can utilize all of the paint brushes and colors that the creator can create, just to a lesser extent, which allows them to work everything instead of being specialized like a cleric or a wizard or anything like that.
That's great. That's really good.
I like that
That's
a lot.
very,
Yeah.
very good.
What's that saying? Art imitates life. Is that what everyone always says, or whatever?
Yeah.
That. Yeah. I
Or
like
the
that.
opposite, life imitates art. But
Yeah,
it's
in some
yeah,
instances.
sort of the elements of like sub-creation,
Yep.
in the Tolkienian sense, right? You are by the very act that you're doing, it gives you access to whatever the high, yeah. So it makes them almost clerics in a different sense,
Yeah.
as well. It's I guess all magic users are just clerics. It's
I think it's
just
what we've nailed it
different
down to.
things.
I think we've just
Well,
decided.
I think of them as different pools, and you can be an expert
Yeah.
at pulling from one or another pool. But bards, they are the quintessential jack of all trades. They can pull from all the pools, and that is because when you're trying to create your masterpiece, you are drawing on every single thing you can to create that masterful piece of art. It's not just one thing.
Right. Like I've been thinking about a little bit what Edu you were just talking about. The way that I think you were trying to explain it was like high level wizards, not to try again, not to dip too far into the arcana, but high level wizardry is a culmination of knowledge. And then like when you get to high level art and creativity, it's knowledge with application. So you take all of your reference and then you mush it together to whatever you want it to be instead of just being like,
Yeah.
this is the formula and everyone agrees. It's this is my art. This is how I've applied it. And then someone else turns around and says, well, this is my art and I've applied it differently. And that's where you can compare it. You can't just compare it to like whatever you know is the objective goal, I guess.
For me, it's the idea of like an artist takes the divine form, looks at how that form actually applies to the natural world, and then also looks at the human understanding of what that thing in nature is. And he takes all three of those to create something. And so you need all three of those versus like the cleric is a expert at the divine form, and the druid is an expert in the natural or primal form of what things actually are in nature. And then the wizards can take an abstract form and be like, this is what this thing is in a mathematical or like abstract sense, like that. And the bard takes all three, an understanding of all three of those to create what he creates in music or art or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's seeing kind of the deeper part, uh, past the other stuff in a certain sense. Sort of, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I think the book references them as like pulling on the like melodies of creation, which is very
Yeah.
Tolkien in its description. And maybe Ethan, if you have the book by you, or I can grab it. But
I got it.
I
I'll be
think,
right back.
yeah, I think it literally says
Something about them pulling for
something.
the right. I like that explanation though.
Yeah,
They're jack of all trades, hence why their output is a combination mixture of all the pools.
and it kind of emphasizes the improvisational aspect of bards and their magic, right? Like,
Right, because like
it's
when you because
there.
like I think the pros do it a lot better, obviously, but like true like application of it is like they're in any scenario and then like their inspiration, their output, their not somatic, but yeah, no, their verbal component is supposed to be like scenario based. They're basically like stand up comedians half the time, like wandering around doing
Yeah.
crowd work. They're like, oh, big dragon, don't slay me, please just obey me or something like that, and then like that's their fucking, you know what I mean, like
Pass commands.
right, like
Yeah.
yeah. So like when played in that sense, like truly well, like it is almost like live feed into like output immediately.
So I think the College of Creation Bard has something specific to the music of creation.
Yeah, maybe
But
that's
it
right.
says here, in the worlds of D&D, words and music are not just vibrations of air, but vocalizations with power all their own. The bard is a master of song, speech, and the magic they contain. Bards say that the multiverse was spoken into existence, that the words of the gods gave it shape, and that echoes of these primordial words of creation still resound throughout the cosmos. The music of bards is an attempt to snatch and harness these echoes, subtly woven into their spells and powers.
There it is. So they're able to pull on whatever the source of everything else is, which gives them sort of the track to the other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That explanation is pretty cool too, because they're like, we believe that the words are innately powerful.
And it ties back to paladins, right, with their oaths, actually.
Because then if you think about it that way, can you skim through see if there's a paladin one in the oath?
Yeah,
Like your oath is your like sacred bond, and because if we're going along the trek of like, words are power, in that sense, like, then yeah, go ahead, Ed. Then you're really on it now.
Yeah. Let's see what Ethan tracks down here.
Surely there'll be something that's relatively close if the bard one says that.
Yeah, and I just think of how, like, one of the things that I'd like to do, I forgot to do it for this campaign, it's a little late now, but I tend to like making my players come up with the verbal components of their spells. And that sort of emphasize, and like, the first time I did it, right, we had a character who was sort of Japanese inspired, so like all of his spells were in Japanese. We had one character who, like, all of his were cast in Greek. There was a bard who like came up with little rhymes to cast each of the spells, and I like that because it emphasizes sort of the magic word, I guess, element of casting magic. But then also, if you're a bard, right, you kind of have the ability to improvise it to whatever you want, if the player feels comfortable with that or something like that.
That is actually something we haven't touched on now. Now I'm thinking about it, like the verbal component of spells.
Words can power.
Maybe we could do that in the arcane one.
So what they just say about this is, whatever their origin and their mission, paladins are united by their oaths to stand against the forces of evil. Whether sworn before a god's altar in the witness of a priest, in a sacred glade before nature spirits and fey beings, or in a moment of desperation and grief with the dead as the only witness, a paladin's oath is a powerful bond. It is a source of power that turns a devout warrior into a blessed champion.
Yeah, so okay. So at least they're consistent throughout the book. On the the power of the spoken words, or like the words in the world, I guess.
And the word blessed came up again there, that like how you were describing it, Jared, like, Usain Bolt is blessed, right?
Yeah.
Use the same language here.
I was saying it in comparison to like how like, because like we talk about, like, as you scale up, you become less average, you become more and more closer to like maybe God, I guess, like a demigod. But like to an average person, like that person, you'd be like, oh, that guy's blessed. He's blessed with his ability. He's a blessed person. He's
Yeah.
Because lucky's not the right word, because it's not just like pure talent. It's raw, like,
or chance.
Right? Yeah, or chance at all. Like, I mean, Usain Bolt's lucky, of course, that he is that tall and whatever, but he's also blessed that he has, that speed, that natural gift, that natural work ethic, the passion, blessed all the way. An average person would say he's blessed, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, which is how I think a person who would be like in the village seeing that guy stroll through when he was like, like level 7 or 8, be like, oh, that guy, he's blessed by X or Y or whoever.
This is cool. They have this section about breaking your oath. In the PHB, a paladin tries to hold to the highest standards of conduct, but even the most virtuous paladin is fallible. Sometimes the right path proves too demanding. Sometimes a situation calls for the lesser of two evils. And sometimes the heat of emotion causes a paladin to transgress his or her oath. A paladin who has broken a vow typically seeks absolution from a cleric who shares his or her faith, or from another paladin of the same order. The paladin might spend an all-night vigil in prayer as a sign of penitence, or undertake a fast or similar act of self-denial. After a rite of confession and forgiveness, the paladin starts fresh. If a paladin willfully violates his or her oath and shows no sign of repentance, the consequences can be more serious. At the DM's discretion, an impenitent paladin might be forced to abandon this class and adopt another, or perhaps take the Oathbreaker paladin option that appears in the Dungeon Master Guide. I didn't realize that you could, as part of breaking your oath, you could be like, well, now you're just like a fighter, so take X amount of levels in fighter.
Yep, you can revoke all of it. Yeah, you can leave almost no chance for like
something kind of cool I saw.
Not a transfer, but something else.
With an interview with one of the like game designers of Baldur's Gate 3. This is just, I haven't played it yet. I want to.
How have you not played this game? God damn it. Guys, I need you guys to play this game. I need you to play this game.
Something cool that I saw is apparently...
My computer won't run it.
The game has you have the ability to respec your character, your subclass or even your class if you want to. Just because basically the game is so big, they were like, we don't want people to have to start over if they realize they weren't as interested in what they started as.
Yes, that is fair.
So
I have played 81 hours and I'm still not done.
There's an exception.
Sorry. Well, I'm going to ask the question in a minute.
There's an exception, though, and there's one subclass you cannot pick at the start of the game, and it's Oathbreaker. And Oathbreaker is the only one you cannot respec out of. You actually have to in-game seek atonement.
I might be playing an Oathbroken Paladin.
There you go. So Jared, you apparently are incapable of respecting.
Yes,
until you.
Okay, here we go. Spoiler alert for Baldur's Gate 3, in case nobody's played it. When you start as a paladin, you get to play through the game, right? You do all this stuff, and it actually won't tell you what actions you have done to break it. You will just come, when you do a short or long rest, it puts you in this little mini world that's like a campsite. You can talk to the side characters and change your equipment and sell stuff and do whatever. And there's some story elements put in every couple of times. It's where you sleep to rest. And you get dream sequences, but there's a physical.
It's kind of like the fire, the flame shrines, and like Dark Souls 1.
Yeah, but not quite as it's not quite as easy to walk out. It's a whole other loading screen to get to the outside. It's an actual separate world. But this guy, when you do it, you come back to your camp for your short rest or your long rest, and this dude appears, and he's a black knight with a fiery it's the fire glows through the night mask, the classic night mask with the slits and the drop down kind of eye shield thing.
A death knight.
Almost, yeah. And he wears black and gold armor, and he tells you that you're you've broken it, and then now you have all this stuff revoked, and now you become the oath breaking subclass, and you get other channel divinities, and you actually have to you have to go up and talk to him. And you can't multi-class out of it until you atone, and you have to go talk to him to atone. But I've heard you can just keep breaking it and keep re-atoning as long as you're as long as you keep up and you get your levels up before you break it again. But I think it's from murdering people. I don't really know what I did in the game because I didn't feel like I broke it. But
I was about to say, was this a conscious Jared choice that you broke your own?
It happened to me, and I was shocked. He showed up my camp, and I was like, oh, who's this guy? I'll talk to him. And he's like, hello, Oathbreaker. You're like, oh, you're like, damn. Got me. But it doesn't tell you. That's the coolest part. So if for some reason, if you don't have to long rest or if you don't long rest for a decent amount of time, he'll just show up, and you're like, oh, damn, what did I do? This was because I remember him showing up after
hours of play.
I'm pretty sure I played a couple of hours and talked to a lot of people before he showed up, and I was like, oh, what's this guy? And then by the time he told me, I was like, oh, damn, I have no idea what I did. But yeah, it's cool. But you cannot do it. You have to earn that subclass and then re-atone for it. That's why I played it, is because I didn't see it as a listed option. So I was like, oh, that means I can just break my oath and see what happens. So yeah, that's super cool. That it is in Baldur's Gate 3, which I highly recommend. Fantastic game.
That's super cool.
That is super cool. I do want to play that game. I just don't have a computer right now that runs it. My laptop is
it's a pretty hardy game. I'm not gonna lie.
Witcher 3 on my laptop, and it's freaks out sometimes. So,
but yeah, highly recommend. But God,
But
dude.
yeah, I thought that was a cool way of doing Oathbreaker.
No, I mean it's a cool like the cool thing about that game is there's a lot of elements you can take out that are like even like a la carte or like this is a really cool concept to do. Like this is cool. They did this really well. And there's other parts you're like, I don't really like how they did this. Like this is kind of lame. But yeah, it's a good game all around. They did a really good job for how expansive the concept is. They did a really good job.
For sure.
Yeah, that's my little my rant about the subclass that you have to earn. Go out and earn it. But I think you can I think you can make paladin and then break it once you reclass. I think you're allowed to do that.
And it's interesting to me too, because it comes up with this like kind of tricky thing, right? With you have kind of because they've started putting out more, I guess, evil aligned or paladins that could conceivably be aligned evil, you know, like conquest or even vengeance in the right circumstance. Yeah. And it's curious because, like, Oath of Devotion, Oath of the Ancients, Oath of Glory, right? Oathbreaker makes sense to spec into if you become one. But it doesn't really make sense to me for, like, an Oath of Conquest to have the features that Oathbreaker has.
Yeah, I agree.
And, like, let me find...
The Vengeance one's really weird because they're trying. You feel like you can feel they're trying to kind of dip into it, but they're not sure how to like fully remove certain aspects.
Yeah, let me pull up the Oathbreaker here. Let's see, so they can control undead.
They should have like a numb or a howl or a something.
Dreadful aspect, wisdom saving throw, or frightened against certain creatures within 30 feet of you. 7th level, you and any fiends or undead within 10 feet gain a bonus to melee damage rolls equal to your charisma mod. Resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from not magic. Yeah, like the control undead element, right? Like that makes sense for certain villains, but not for others, you know. So
yeah, and I'm looking through the Oath of Conquest and the what is the Oath of Vengeance, and let's see here. Fight the greater evil. Faced with the choice of fighting my sworn foes or combating lesser evil, I choose the greater evil. No mercy for the wicked by any means necessary. Restitution. My phones wreak ruin on the world because I failed to stop them. So like these tenets, I feel like some of these tenets are hard to like break in the sense of like the vengeance one's not super like I mean that one's pretty easy. You just go for like the bigger enemy essentially is what they're trying to tell you. But like the conquest one, it's just like it is not merely enough to defeat an enemy in battle. You must be so overwhelming in your victory, your enemy's will to fight is shattered forever. Is the first conquest tenet how would you break that by being merciful? Like your character shows mercy, so you lose it.
Yeah, which seems like weird that then you become an Oathbreaker if you break Oath of Conquest by showing mercy.
Right, that's what I'm saying is like it's almost like they're driving you to like be this hard, brutal, like not I don't want to say like murderer, but you know like if you're not brutal in your win, you're like if you show any sort of mercy or let anyone else show mercy, it automatically is like nope, you're not living up to your ideal.
You know what I'm wondering, and this would be kind of a cool thing you could do is let me find this. If you're playing that type of paladin, becoming an Oathbreaker, interestingly, I could see you becoming a Oath of Redemption instead of an Oathbreaker. Like if you started out on the evil side, like as a conquest paladin or something, and you break your oath, you could actually spin it that you're becoming Oath of Redemption. Same with Vengeance, right? Because it's like violence is, these are their tenets. Violence is a weapon of last resort. All people begin life innocent. Patience, wisdom, right? Like it's the opposite of the some of the more brutal paladin subclasses, which I think would be an interesting character arc is if you start as Oath of Conquest and you shirk it for Oath of Redemption.
And I'm not saying like, you know, you can't take it with some leniency, like maybe as long as like, you know, if your DM wants to really ride you about it, you're like, well, I'm not showing mercy, I want to slay them, but my party let them go and that's out of my control or something like that, then maybe you'd be okay. But I do think like breaking that into redemption just seems like
later.
yeah. Just seems like breaking that into redemption just seems like a I don't know. It doesn't seem like a punishment, which is like Oathbreaker is kind of supposed to be like a full change. And I feel like unless you're already playing like a very hard, brutal like conquest or vengeance, like
I don't think that. I think that the reason it kind of said in the Oathbreaker kind of breaking your oath kind of box in the PHB, the last thing was like you could be an Oathbreaker, but actually the first one was you just lose all your power. You're just like a fighter now until you figure out what you want to do.
fight with a cool symbol.
I think the respect to another subclass makes perfect sense. Like the opposite subclass would be great, because like I think Oathbreaker, the reason it's not in the player's handbook, it's in the DM's guide, is because an Oathbreaker paladin is meant to be an NPC villain that the DM plays.
Correct.
Not like a player playing an Oathbreaker paladin, in my opinion. That's how I read it.
I mean, the whole tagline that's under is evil player options. So if you want to run an
that's
evil
what I'm saying.
game,
Like it's almost supposed to be like a punishment to your character because you're not adhering to what you said you were going to play.
You're right, or like an evil campaign where it's like, how am I going to have healer classes if everybody's evil? I can't have like an Oath of Redemption evil cleric, but I can't have a death cleric, and they'll have the same.
You can have a death cleric.
Yeah, and then I have the same types of spells I can pull, and I can still heal the party. So it's like for that evil campaign that you want to run, that makes a lot more sense to me.
I've thought about ways to do a death cleric.
We talked about this in a previous episode.
I think we did, yeah.
Because we talked about like the oh my gosh, what was his name? He was like a lich who like did stand-up comedy. Do you remember this conversation?
Yeah, that was Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeldius, I think, is what.
Yeah, or something like that.
Hold on, I do remember this. I think,
take your soul.
I think I remember this now. I have to re-listen to it.
We were trying to see if we could make like a good necromancer. That was the whole point of like.
Oh yeah, and Death Domain, right? Because their whole thing is like they, deal extra necrotic damage and like that kind of stuff. And you could, I considered spinning one as like, almost like you could spin. I think that was. Oh, I was thinking of ways you could reflavor things, and I think for Death Domain,
you could do like a raven. You could do like a Raven Queen build.
Well, I was thinking almost like an alchemist, because if you could run it like
Full Metal Alchemist,
like a mad scientist,
Full Metal Alchemist,
who's like got a bunch of like you flavor all of the spells as being like needles that they're shoving into people or like vials that they're throwing, and it actually kind of fits a lot of the
build. Like a full-on Mengele build.
I don't know Mengele.
Oh, he was the guy that was in, I think it was Auschwitz, who did all the experiments on people for the Nazis.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy mad scientist who would inject people with stuff to like.
Is that how you say it? Mengele?
Mengele. I think it's like Joseph Mengele or something.
Just because I think here, like, starting at second level, you use a channel divinity.
Mengele. Yep.
To
the Angel of Death. Yeah, he's the Angel of Death.
The Angel of Death.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that for sure. I mean, but I also think you could do this as like you could sort of respin this as being almost a poisoner, because necrosis is very close to poison. Obviously, it's dealing necrotic damage, but you can flavor it. Was it flavors free? I've heard one of the creators I know say it. So it's like I'm just thinking of like you could respin this one very easily as being like more alchemical or poison oriented. The Death Domain cleric, and kind of, you could do something interesting where it's like you're not so much a Death Domain cleric, but perhaps you serve like a serpent god or something like that, or like if you're a Yuntai, right, or Yuan Ti, however you prefer the pronunciation, but like you could spin it as being like a servant of a Yuan Tai god or something, and it's like you're poisoning them, but it's not poison, it's not necrosis, but same deal.
I totally forgot that there were like laser weapons in the DM gun.
Yep, they're broken.
Yeah, they are.
They're obscenely good.
That's why they're in the guide.
I don't know why
your supervillain just comes out with like a laser rifle.
It's not my fault. You gotta fight Darth Vader and Han Solo.
You know what? This game is over now. We're done.
I mean, the laser rifle, is that the one with reload 60? Right, you got 60 shots. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
30 shots, but still 30 shots at 3d8 radiant each shot.
The holy hand cannon of Antioch right there, dude. 3d6 radiant.
The laser pistol has 50 shots. And it's 3d6.
My God.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, like I gave my party a weapon that they went through a lot of effort to craft, and it's a gun. It's like a rifle, and I did some stuff to balance it. Like I created my own property for weapons, which I refer to as careful reload, which means basically you need to spend an action to reload this weapon regardless of any feats that normally allow you to bypass loading. So it's like basically you get 4 shots with this thing and then you have to spend an entire action to reload. But it deals 3d6, and part of its ability is it cannot have its damage reduced in any way.
That's cool.
But it took 4 sessions for them to gather the materials, and they had to do a whole heist, and it's still with the gunslinger who's he's a blood hunter, but he's a gunslinger, and he he only gets he gets to fire it twice every round, and then he has to reload every 3rd round. Spend his entire turn. But those things are just broken. Like if you're fighting a fiend with like a laser rifle, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. I have a DM to DM question for you, because I was now like kind of flipping through the DM. I was like kind of flipping through the DM guide. Have any of you guys played with plot points, the optional plot points rule?
I don't know what
I don't know what that is either.
I will read this to you because I didn't even know this was in the book, and this looks dope, but also kind of crazy awesome. Plot points allow players to change the course of the campaign and introduce plot complications, alter the world, etc. If your first reaction to reading this optional rule is to worry that your players might abuse it, it's probably not for you. Using plot points. Each player starts with 1 plot point. During a session, a player can spend that point for 1 effect. The effect depends on your group's approach to the optional rule. 3 options are presented below. A player can spend no more than 1 plot point per session. You can increase this limit if you like, especially if you want the players to drive more of the story. Once every player at the table has spent a plot point, they each gain 1 plot point. So here are the options. Option 1, what a twist. A player who spends a plot point gets to add some element to the setting or situation that the group, including you, must accept as true, you the DM. For example, a player can spend a plot point and state that his or her character has found a secret door. An NPC appears, or a monster turns out to be a long-lost ally polymorphed into a horrid beast. A player who wants to spend a plot point in this way should take a minute to discuss his or her idea with everyone at the table and get feedback before setting a plot development. The second option is the plot thickens. Whenever a player spends a plot point, the player to his or her right must add a complication to the scene. For example, if the player who spends the plot point decides that her character has found a secret door, the player to the right might state that opening the door triggers a magical trap that teleports the party to another part of the dungeon.
My God.
And then this is my favorite. Option 3, the gods must be crazy. With this approach, there is no permanent DM. Everyone makes a character, and one person starts as the DM and runs the game as normal. That person's character becomes an NPC who can tag along with the group or remain on the sidelines as the group wishes. At any time, a player can spend a plot point to become the DM. That player's character becomes an NPC and play continues. It's probably not a good idea to swap roles in the middle of combat, but it can happen if your group allows time for the new DM to settle into his or her role and pick up where the previous DM left off. Using plot points in this way can make for an exciting campaign as each new DM steers the game in unexpected directions. This approach is also a great way for would-be DMs to try running a game in a small, controlled doses. In a campaign that uses plot points this way, everyone should come to the table with a bit of material prepared for specific encounters in mind. A player who isn't prepared or doesn't feel like DMing can choose not to spend a plot point for that session.
Oh, I'm just picturing my entire list of chaos as Ed's trying to run an actual campaign.
You're muted, Jared. I feel like he's been talking for a while now.
I wasn't muted on the other one. I said I'm imagining me just rolling into this session with an entire list of Ed trying to run a serious campaign. I'm like, first we go to the cave.
Yeah.
And you guys see just
this. I'll say just right off the bat, this does not fit my style of DMing for Dungeons and Dragons.
It doesn't fit mine either because nobody else knows about my world except me.
I'll say the lowest level one reminds me of like a lot of tables will have this alternate rule. It's called like I know a guy.
Yeah.
So it's like, which is sort of a similar thing. So it's like collectively the party maybe gets once per session, or I guess it depends how you do it. Maybe it's, every player gets it, but like, oh shoot, there's a arcane lock on the place we're trying to break into. The party, one of them could be like, oh, I know a guy, he can cast knock. I know this wizard that he lives in this city, from whatever. And that, I think that's what was described there works very well for a highly improvisationally driven group and team, like table. I don't know if I can take things in stride well enough, but total plot pivots out of left field, that's tricky for me. Because it's not the way I prepare.
Do you imagine the chaos of just like if you know someone's a notoriously terrible dice roller, you just force them to start combat and switch them with the DMs, so the DMs rolls are just terrible the entire combat, and then switch them back out. Natural 1, natural 3.
In City of Mist, one of the rules in the full book is because everything in City of Mist is done sort of it's derived from like cinema tropes. So one of the moves that a player can do is have a flashback. And I mean, this could be like, you encounter a particular monster or something, and maybe you guys run in on a werewolf. And then just spinning a situation here, right?
Yeah, good.
The team is trying to break into a bank, and they get there and they realize, to stop a bank robbery maybe, and they get there and they realize, oh crap, we're dealing with a bunch of werewolves that are attacking us. One of the players who, it makes sense in their story, maybe they're like the Rift of Hephaestus or something, like a forge god. It's like, wait. I'm gonna have a flashback here, and basically they can do a flashback to like, and be like, oh, I've been investigating this group of people, and I'm starting to see some evidence that they're werewolves. I want to forge some silver bullets. And then you cut back, and now they have the silver bullets that they can kind of pull out at the, it's kind of the noir, the heist kind of, vibe of like, oh no, something crazy's happened. Oh, but we got you, right back, which works with City of Mist vibe. And D&D, the storytelling's less loose, at least the way I run it. It's like,
yeah, it just wouldn't work for me.
Enough for you to retcon stuff. Yeah, it'd be pretty difficult. I feel like retcon would be pretty hard to do, regardless of what you're running.
I didn't even know that was an optional rule you could do. So that's why I was like, whoa.
I think now that you've read it, I've heard like the add the twist ones, I think, but I've never heard them like swapping the entire like leadership.
I kind of totally disagree with the like, this is the best way to get introduced to DMing. No.
I guess it depends on what you're doing. If you're running like a one shot, maybe.
I think a one shot that the DM can prepare everything for, because like that's, I think, for most people is the biggest problem with DMing, is that they're uncomfortable with being unprepared. And I think getting into it, a good way to do it is something that is closed-ended with a very particular goal, where the players are expecting to have a very linear plot where you can prep everything, and maybe there'll be some small things that the players throw at you that you have to like work on your improvise skills, but it's not like you're having to, prep. Yeah. I think that's a better way to get into DMing than sort of having this, there's no DM. We're going to do like, non-traditional black
DM
D&D.
Yeah. And like or like running a module. Like run a module that has everything for you. And yeah, the characters will probably try to throw something at you that's not exactly in the module, or one shot's a great way to do it. Writing lore is an occupational hazard, as we always say on the show. So doing something huge like that, where it's like a huge world and like then you're just thrown into it, could be tough. Because like, I've prepped like 3 cities that you guys could maybe go to on this next session, but you could also just knock one out of left field and just decide to go somewhere else. And then I'm like, all right, well, I wonder if we've ever done that before.
Wonder if we've ever done that before in a game, where we just avoid the cities that you've prepped.
And still in the desert that we've been in for the past 4 sessions. And then you're like, no, you know what? We like the desert. We're just going to go around the city.
We're going to go around and get on the ocean, and then we're going to dodge the other city and go up the river.
Yep. Yeah, no.
It's all fun and games.
That's why Jared started the phrase, writing lore is an occupational hazard.
It is terrible.
I write out a whole city and then nobody goes there ever. It's just
me building very complex political organizations and machines just for you guys to just not go to them.
And just decide that Alan's going to be our Lord and Savior.
Just to decide that this one random dude who's not affiliated at all is going to be in charge of it now.
That's why I always make sure that I'll point. Basically, I manage my sessions in such a way that I know where the players will be going. I make them have whatever conversations they have at the end of the session. So I'm not at a point where it's like, oh, maybe this city's an option. I have them have the conversation about the options before my prep time. So I can be like, okay, you guys decided on this last time. So now we're here and I've done my prep, is kind of more how I do it, just to try to avoid the hazard. And of course, there's always going to be stuff that doesn't get shared and you can just loop it back in later. But it's I have not yet had a entire city get skipped. So
it'll come.
I didn't know what I did wrong too for that one, because I had plot points associated with that you guys had found, and threads, and you just guys, and sometimes that happens, it's just they're just yep, we're just not gonna pull on this thread right now, and I'm like, okay, Great.
Yeah, it was not a conscious thing, as I recall.
I don't really remember being that conscious either.
I don't even remember the exact motivation for doing what we did, but I seem to recall it was presented as an option among many.
Yeah.
Was kind of the way, like, so we didn't realize how fleshed out that particular part was until after we'd already dodged it.
Correct.
Well, yeah, and I didn't say it until at the end because like that's not the point. The point isn't that, because I had stuff planned for whatever, but I think I've also just gotten, as a DM, gotten better at kind of being like not railroady, but also like this is a plot point, and like you recognize this from like your backstory or whatever, and like creating ways where players don't feel railroaded, but are like, this is a thread I want to pull.
That's kind of what I've done, and I even like, so with the end of the game coming up, right, and the fact that I'll likely be moving somewhat soonish, right? I like took my players and I sat them down, and I'm like, look, we've got X many sessions left. I'm just operating under the assumption that this is where you guys want to go and that you've discussed this in character, because I want to get everybody's stories resolved with the limited time we have.
Yeah.
And I think that's a
factor.
Yeah. And that's just, communicating. And like, if you tell the players, like, it's not railroading, because like it's all been leading to this, like their development has, but I'm just like, I'm going to operate under the assumption that this is the track you guys are following. We are going to follow this. If you want to deviate elsewhere, that's fine. But just know that if we don't follow this track, we might not finish everything. So that's kind of the...
And it'll get higher. It'll get more focused later, right? Because like right now, you guys are level 4. Nobody knows who you are. You just kind of finished, you beat your first thing, like, but nobody, it's not like a king's reaching out to you like, please help me with this award level threat. It's like,
I was going to say, I feel like it wasn't conscious because we weren't doing it. Like, I feel like it wasn't a conscious decision because we hadn't felt like, not that this, like, I don't want to say like the severity's not high, but like there wasn't like a, there wasn't like a real consequence. The consequence was like, oh, well, I mean, if we have nothing else to do in that direction, we'll just do this and then we'll pivot and move to there. Yeah. That's why I think it was just like the most natural thing, just keep kind of like marrying on our way, and not like, I think we avoided the city like just in like by happenstance, just because there wasn't like there's someone waiting for you there. We're like, oh, okay, we'll just go there then. It wasn't anything like that.
Different. There's going to be threads for a couple of different cities in this next one, really just kind of opening the doorway, but you guys will then get to decide, like, and they're all in different parts of the world, kind of. So it's like you'll have a lot of
the adventure starts
to kind of talk about what you guys want to do, where you want to go, what threads you want to pull, that kind of thing. Which I think is a better way of doing it, because I still have a modicum of control over planning, because I'm just fairly certain that you'll pick one of the options that I have, because really there are no other threads anywhere else yet, because you just haven't been anywhere else.
I got you.
And then that also allows for threads that can be pulled later on, that you just have in kind of your back pocket too, right? So it's like, you go to one place and then you're like, okay, you pull that thread for a while, and then you're like, okay, I think we've kind of run that. Okay, well, there's these other ones too, so maybe we can do those. So
meander back around.
Meander back around.
And that tends to be like, it depends on the vibe you're going for with your campaign, right? And kind of the amount of time you have. Like setting expectations is key, right? Like I just, like with my players, I kind of, there was quite a bit of freedom, but the world that I have in particular kind of limits the number of threads that I can present at any time, just the way my world functions, right? It's not, which is different than the game that I'm just running for a bunch of the first time players, because like they're in a city and I'm kind of trying to keep the focus narrow on this one city, but like it was the second session, and like I dropped like 5 plot hooks, and I'm just like, we'll see where they bite, and like there's this thieves guild interest, and there's this possible assassination attempt they literally just uncovered by listening at the bar. There's some dark elves with some slavery going on, stealing people in the night. There's this whole plot about farming equipment getting stolen. They were put, told, oh, go check out this particular organization. They might be able to help you with this thing you were talking about with your backstory. So I was like, I have no idea what they're going to do. But that one I'm just kind of winging a lot more. Like I prep, certain combats and stuff and, NPCs, but it's like that one I'm just like, wherever they want to go, whatever. The other one, it's kind of meant to feel more, a different feel to it, I guess. Which it's like it's dark fantasy, right? It's kind of it feels a little more, I think, like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, right? Where it's like you may have an open world sort of, but you're gonna end up on the plot. You're gonna end up here kind of no matter what, because like they're these funnel points. It's less of a web and more of like a rope getting passed through different links. Getting channeled through this, and afterwards you have a little bit more freedom, but you're gonna end up at the same place anyway. And for me, try to do it in a way where it doesn't feel like they're getting forced any direction, and I'm laying it out so that they end up there.
That's kind of like, for me, the early levels of a campaign, especially a homebrew campaign like this, which is open world, is like you're really just making connections. Is your big thing at the beginning. You're pulling on plot threads that also push maybe one of your guys' backstory plots or something, but also you're like, that's where you meet all the people that maybe will help you later. That's where you're making all these like connections and getting really integrated into the world. So that later on, when you're like, we have to go here at this time because this is the funnel, this is the big bad, all those connections are like, we can call on this guy, we can call on that guy, we need to meet this guy and talk to him because he said something about having, knowledge about X, Y, or Z, right, earlier that we didn't know was going to be important. Like that's, to me, that's what the early stages are, and that's why you have more freedom, because it's like, how are you going to go about making people like you? Almost.
Or in my case, not like me.
Especially in the way especially your case.
Yeah. I gotta get better at that.
I'm playing a very unlikable character, I think. It's kind of like if Harry Potter did not maintain his humility when he realized he was special. Is sort of the vibe that I'm going for.
It's been fun to play NPCs with him because he's cheeky.
I really like bantery characters. Of course, but I like thinking about how they banter too. Because I'm not gonna play I've played stupid characters where it's like they're talkers, but they're because I enjoy role playing, in character, but like they're not being witty. They're like kind of gooning around. As opposed to like someone like, Tiresias, who like now has an 18 intelligence, right? As after our level up, so just sort of, and is kind of an asshole, but like can kind of back up what he's doing. So he's like the type of person that's very hateable. I was listening to a podcast. I was talking about, he's like, because he's sort of Tiresias is kind of like a variant on the lawful stupid, like a little bit. Like he's not a lawful he's not lawful good, like hard headed, but like it's the type of character that is taking himself very seriously. But you have to, as a player and generally as a party, take him slightly less seriously and be okay with the fact that like he might get knocked on his ass and kind of shown up. which is kind of what I'm trying to do. Because, like, you know, it's you gotta be okay with him. You know, I gotta be okay with him being kind of the butt of the joke sometimes. Like if, you know, he gets clobbered because he's level 4.
Well, you haven't really met any characters that are like quote unquote high intelligence would be bantering back yet.
That's true.
So, you got dropped a couple times in this last one. But the thing is, with Tiresias, because he's that lawful stupid, he doesn't even. I know he's not even focusing on the fact that he almost died. It's just the fact that I won. I killed him. So I don't care that I almost died. Like, I'm the best.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Like, there's no humility.
I can't believe I had the foresight to bring a healer with me. Yeah, I knew I would need it.
Yeah,
exactly.
You know,
I'm so glad that I was able to get my heals that I definitely planned on needing, anyways. Yeah, it's the classic trope of I'm never wrong as long as I win. Like if I'm not dead, I win.
Yeah.
Which is like, and I'll justify any means to remember to get to that same point.
Playing Sokka from Avatar.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
A little bit. And
he's like, we won, and
like,
it was like all the benders, and Sokka was like doing nothing the whole time.
See, it is interesting though, because he does have deeper motivations besides kind of be like he has a reason behind wanting to become what he wants to become.
Of course,
but it's also interesting because I do feel like he's not an evil character, but is one of the few characters I've played where I'm like I could feel him making decisions that could like where he rationalizes it based on his end goal, which is admirable, I think.
I intend to play with this. I've already had ideas.
But I tend to think he's a character who could lean more onto the evil side simply based off what he's fighting for. Because it's not just himself. I'll just say that so I'm not spoiling things for Jared. But it's just if he's given the choice between, you know, certain things and another certain thing, and one's like he's goal oriented.
That's kind of like does he follow? Is there a personal code to that, or is it just a?
So he has
without spoiling.
I mean,
I guess.
It's not a huge spoiler. I mean, his current goal is basically just get stronger.
Okay.
For reasons that are tied to. And it's.
I meant like, does it involve like your alignment though as well? Like, is your alignment?
My alignment?
Yeah.
I'm lawful neutral. I think I might even be true neutral though, because it's not like I have a code per se. But he's not. He's not evil. Like he's not. And if he were to be anything, it would probably be lawful evil. Like he's not going to totally deprave himself ever. Like he's not. You know, he's not going to go and kill a bunch of kids or whatever. But he might.
He'd be like the Superman from like
the Injustice.
The Injustice.
Yeah, the Injustice Superman.
Like, I'm gonna become what I need to be to keep like future evils from happening.
So he's almost running. Evil. Not that you are running the class, but you're kind of running the mindset of like the conquest. It's like I will be so strong that no one else will be able to like be my undoing. Because that's one of the things. Yeah. Like the last one is like. You are the strongest of all, and because of that, you're something. I can't remember what it says.
And I won't show my cards of the backstory, all of them, but essentially it has to do with the order, but it's a very personal reason why he's trying to achieve what he's trying to achieve within the order.
Right. So here it is.
So it's driven by the order, but it's for a personal motivation.
Right. But it's kind of following the strength above all. You shall rule until a stronger one arises. Then you must grow mightier and meet the challenge, or fall to your own ruin. So that kind of like that mindset, though, right?
A little bit.
It's got a really like, more direct goal, but that's kind of what I'm getting the vibe of.
Sure. And it's less might strictly as opposed to just victory, I guess. Like because he's fine being weaker than someone if he can still outthink them, or he's fine being dumber than someone if he can beat their ass.
So he's okay being inferior in a certain aspect as long as his outcome is a win.
achieves ultimate victory.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. All right.
Yeah.
I'm
So
so
I
excited.
think
You guys give me great backstories. So I'm playing a lot with your guys' backstories, which is going to be a lot of fun.
I also have a built-in backup character if he dies.
That is very true.
Is it
Um,
cockier
if that
or less
happens-
cocky?
I'll just say this, Ed. If that happens soon, you're going to get you and only you are going to massive lore dump if you end up taking that person as a backup character.
Oof.
Yeah.
I already have like tons of stuff associated with that character.
Who is in fact much more like actual Harry Potter in
Yeah.
her in that
Yeah.
person's personality.
Yeah.
So a very different type of person than Tiresias.
Yeah.
So I don't think you guys. I don't foresee you guys dying anytime soon. That fight that you had.
That was rough, man.
That was a tough.
crazy.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I think I mentioned it at the end of one of our games, and we need to start doing like a campaign diary just to get my thoughts in order.
Yeah.
I've considered doing like the
Or, like,
problem is
an abridged
right,
version.
with the campaign I'm running now, right? If I were to do a video describing the entirety of my game, like the one I've been running, that would be so long. Just because I realized like the way I built it, everything that has happened is built upon previous things. So it's not like I can really tell a snippet, because the snippet is always going to at least necessitate one person, usually two persons' entire backstories and stuff that preceded in the campaign. So like the only way I could do it is like just literally look at my notes, like the 2.25 note. I'm on page 210, I think, of my notes, handwritten. And just going through.
I'm already like 5 pages handwritten in, and we had one session.
And the thing that makes it more difficult, right, is I do these little intros, which are like a page or two per session. So it's that fills up some space. Though there have been times in the game where I haven't had the intros, just because we were kind of in between major arcs. But it was also funny because I hadn't done it for. We had a guy come in. He played basically from the beginning of this school year up until when he moved about 3 weeks ago. And I basically hadn't done intros then because we were in sort of this intermediary phase. And then he hadn't seen me do an intro at all ever. And I like his last session, I'm like, we're returning to something. And I gave an intro and he was just like, what the fuck was that? I'm like, oh, you actually haven't been here for any of that. Sorry. I began the first year and a half of this campaign like with intros. And he's like, well, guess I won't know where that's going. But it was we ended up
get in the comments if you want us to like video the campaign or something, or like at least audio record it.
Could do that.
I mean, yeah, it takes like no effort to do the. I mean, it doesn't really take effort to do either. I could just hit start and let it run.
We're already using Discord, and that would give you, Jared, a way of like reviewing if you needed to or wanted to.
Yeah. I also I remember the reason I didn't the first time, because I was just going to record it for myself personally, but I realized, I remember my PC was on the fritz. Remember how I destroyed my cable on accident?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I was out of the count. I was on like a Mac laptop, which was just terrible.
Maybe to conclude the recording, because I think Jared's got to hop off soon here.
Yeah.
But just if I could, I'll finish with like a little bit of a mini campaign diary just about how we wrote out this character. So
Yeah.
in a way I thought was pretty cool, because basically my buddy was playing he was kind of playing like an Old West style sheriff, but basically his backstory was that he had been kind of raised as an orphan in this sort of, frontier town. And the town was taken over when he was quite young by this sort of rich guy who sort of, bought out, very old West style, like bought out the politicians, was sort of turning the people into like his personal slaves. It was very like Magnificent Seven.
Okay.
And he eventually, and some of the guys that were hired on had like firearms, which were very new at this time. And he went and eventually stole, basically, ended up kind of having a, blaze of glory, like killed a bunch of these guys and ended up kind of freeing the town and sort of became the warden, I guess, or sheriff for like a decade or what have you. And then he got and chased off the leader, like the guy who was like the wealthy dude who had paid off all the thugs. That guy left with his wife. And then, one day, Ryder in black rolls into town and murders this character. Cassius Wick is his name. Murders Cassius. And then Cassius literally wakes up out of the grave a century later. And like the town has kind of been, fallen into, it's gone. Basically, it's, ghost town now. No one lives there. And he was a custom warlock. We used something created by, I think it was created by Monkey DM. It's inspired by Ghost Rider. So like he kind of, his pact was called Pact of the Trigger. And so basically he could manifest kind of a spectral gun, and he could change its form. And like this was his pact boon, is basically like if he has it in the long gun form, the range of his cantrips is doubled with it. If it's in the short gun form, he doesn't have disadvantage for like melee range attack. So it's kind of that's his whole pact thing. So like he doesn't get pact.
So a revenant then?
He is. He was. But so he ended up joining the party, and he discovered that he's basically the chosen of the god of death. And like the sort of visions he has from the god of death is like in this
Very Ghost Rider.
Yeah, it's in this graveyard, and they're empty graves with headstones. And at the beginning, he was only able to see two. There was the empty, the first one on the left, which was the first person he had to track down and kill. And the last name was Cassius Wick, his own name. So basically, there are these empty graves in between, and basically the god of death's things like, look, there's 7 people. Like, here's our deal, basically. I'm bringing you back to handle some of your own debts, but you need to basically eliminate these people that have been avoiding death.
Okay.
So he has to basically bump these people off that are avoiding death, usually by causing other people to die before their time. So, so like one of the guys they killed was like sort of a vampire-esque person. Yada yada. What happens is they get to this big fight, and this was kind of this is the backstory of another character, and they were fighting. The scenario is basically in this sort of almost industrial factory with like spinning, like this giant pit of spinning blades in the middle. And Cassius, like his player, looked at me. He's like, do I understand that I'm a revenant and that I'm going to like come back if I die? Do I understand this nature of the deal? And I'm like, yeah, that was made clear. He's like, great. So he just basically, this was like the preliminary boss. There were 2 bosses, and this was the lower end. And he just like is like, fine. And he just goes and tackles this guy into the meat grinder. Nice. And successfully. And I'm just like, you are basically, gone.
Obliterated.
And then what happens is he kind of gets chewed out a little bit for,
kind of abusing his immortality, for his limited immortality.
And what happens is there's this organization in the world that I have called the Knights of Autumn. And basically they're like a paladin organization. And a group of them had shown up and sort of started dealing with the threats outside of the big boss in the surrounding area. And something that I had kind of dropped in is that one of the Knights of Autumn died, and it's pretty unusual. Like it's hard to kill him.
Mhm.
And so basically what happened is after Wick died, the god of death is like, all right, here's what's going to happen. We've got somebody else you can use. Be more careful. And then what happened is he basically crawls out of a grave as this Knight of Spring or Knight of Autumn who had died. And I literally texted him, you are still Cassius Wick and you have all of his memories, and I sent him an entire backstory I wrote.
Yeah.
I said, this is also just as real to you as Cassius Wick. This name is just as much your name as Cassius Wick. And as he comes out of the grave, he basically feels a gun to the back of his head. And he's confronted by the real Cassius Wick, who has been chosen as an emissary of the goddess of vengeance, which was actually previously the role of one of the other PCs. He was the avatar of the goddess of vengeance. Now he's the avatar of the goddess of justice. This guy's the new avatar of the goddess of vengeance, and it is the real Cassius Wick, which gave a whole spin to the final tombstone being Cassius Wick.
Oh, my God.
So basically, Cassius Wick is like, look, I'm not like you. I'm not going to take you out when you're weakened, because he came back at 1 hit point. He's like, I'm not going to do that. You can find me. You'll be able to find me if you go to this place. So basically, they end up, long story short, they go to hell, the Dark Hells, and they track down Cassius Wick, who now goes by Cassius Darkflame. So there's Cassius Wick, who is not really Cassius Wick. And basically, he realized, like, I just have the memories of this body that I was in. I'm not actually this guy. And basically, they end up fighting Cassius Darkflame. And the way I spun it, just because we were writing out Chris's character, we were writing out Cassius Wick, is like they basically chewed down his 2 health bars. And then he's like, look, I can't die, especially not here. So why don't we, just settle this the old-fashioned way with like a quick draw?
Nice.
And I created a particular magic item for this occasion. I called it the Heart Piercer. It's the name of the bullets. And it's essentially power word kill that goes up to 200 hit points on a stick. So basically, if you fire it at someone and you intend to kill them, if they have under 200 hit points, they die. So this guy was basically a murder-suicide is kind of what Cassius Wick was wanting, the actual one. And also when he came back, he was in his like chewed up and like meat grindered body, like he'd gone and gotten it. And he came back like that. And then they kind of fire it. And basically before this fight, Cassius Darkflame tells Chris's PC, he's like, you don't even know what you are. And basically he tells him, like, the god of death can't speak to the living. He can only speak, so he cannot choose living champions. So what he does is he produces spirits that are not actual souls and basically imposes them on the dead and uses those as his emissaries. So Chris's PC was nobody.
The real Cassius Wick was Cassius Darkflame because that was the real soul.
Yes.
But Cassius Wick was just a copy, like a shadow copy of the real one.
Crazy. And they ended
so cool.
And they ended up, of course, he died because he got shot with the Heart Piercer, had his kind of final words and died. And then he meets the god of death, and the god of death, now has the Cassius Wick grave is filled.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, now you've kind of discovered it. And basically, the way the god of death operates, right, is when he creates these beings, he's not evil.
Yeah.
He's basically like,
is he neutral?
he's neutral, but he very much you could almost conceive of him as being good because he's very much like the reason for death is so new life can come forward.
Yeah.
But basically he says you now have kind of two choices before you, because basically he was like, how do I know, what I am? And he's like, well, because you took the exact memories of this guy and you made different choices than he would have made. You made the just choice as opposed to the sort of I would say expedient choice. And he's basically like, Cassius had to die, because he was killed by one of these avatars of the god of death. He's like, he had to die.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't die, he would have constantly sought vengeance on the people who attacked the town and would have brought hell upon them. Like they would have all been killed if he'd kept doing what he was doing. Then he's like, basically what ends up happening is he's like, this is part of the process. Once you actually come to a realization of what you are, you have two choices. And basically he points to these two graves that are empty. And he says, if you lay in this one, you'll truly become my emissary. You'll be one of the spirits that escorts souls to the land of the dead and basically keeps the barrier of death. If you pick this one, you'll get to see what you would become if you were given a fresh chance at life. So basically a reincarnation, but it's not a reincarnation. It's just because he wasn't incarnated before.
Initially,
and he basically had this choice, and he decided to be reborn and see what his life would look like. And I just kind of ended it with like, he gets in the grave and the god of death is just shoveling dirt on him. And then all memory of what he was before passes away as he's kind of brought into this new life. And I didn't say where he was, who he was, just left it at that.
That's so cool.
That's a good little.
So.
That's hard to follow, but that's pretty cool. It would have been cool from the one. I will have to listen to it back again, probably to get the full one. But I got the gist of it, which is cool. And the ending was nice too. Like you just leave it blank. You don't. There's no expansion. That's it. Case closed.
And the element of tragedy is like, no one knows what happened after he was shot. None of the rest of his party actually knows he gets to be reborn. They all think he's just dead.
Yeah.
So that's sort of it's only the players who know. I guess now it's only the players and the god of death. Like the god of death is the only one who knows because Chris's PC doesn't remember it anymore because that's what he gave up, to be reborn as his memory of the time before. So, it's dreary but hopeful, which kind of fits his entire aesthetic, the whole game. So
awesome.
Just thought I'd share that to conclude this
great.
episode. Speaking of, I guess, divine magic,
bring it back.
relationship with the gods.
We've gone full circle.
But thanks for listening to this episode of Dragons and Diatribes. Next time we've got a episode on probably arcane magic, I think is what we'll hit next. And we'll be able to talk a little bit more about wizardry and artificery and the more mathematical sides of magic. But glad you all could join us and take it. Stay frosty.
Stay frosty.
Stay frosty.
Stay frosty, I think was our sign off.
God, we gotta work on that one.